So I help people uncover the why behind their challenges, behaviour patterns, and in many cases, suffering. 9.9 times out of 10 it's pain, as in pain is the most powerful motivator we have. In many cases that's an un-PC thing to say because there's this sort of view of pain as this bad thing and I'm sorry I've gone through that and if I didn't go through this my life would have been better. But I break self-sabotage down as an unconscious motive. For example, you say consciously that you would love to prioritise your weight or let's say prioritise study and personal development, but then your actions demonstrate that you're going out with your friends and you're partying, that sort of thing.
That value system you're talking about, is that the foundation of a person's self-esteem?
Correct. Their self-worth. One way to think about it would be your whole identity, in fact, revolves around your value system. There's a quote that I love that Jung says, which is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
When your wife is happy, life is grand. Is there any truth to that or is that full of crap? Band-Aid. Hi everyone, if you are enjoying the content and the guests that are on the podcast and you're wanting more, then please do us a favor. If you can just press the subscribe button, that would be an amazing help for us. But also, just want to mention an amazing organization called AOK, who sponsors the Mandate podcast. And so they are an organization that runs suicide prevention, intervention, and wellbeing programs. And so AOK stands for Acts of Kindness. And so you didn't need me to tell you about the alarmingly high rates of suicide in our nation, especially amongst our rangatahi, our young people, even our tane, our men. And so if you're wanting to stand in the gap and you want to be well trained and well equipped to have these courageous life supporting conversations, then please check them out, aok.nz. If you're a business, a company or a collective or even as an individual, check them out, www.aok.nz. You could very well be that one person to help save a life. Welcome to Mandate, where we navigate fresh perspectives and nothing is off the table. Tonight's guest is not from Tamaki Makaurau. In fact, he is from the beautiful South Island, from Nelson. And so the man is an extraordinary individual who happens to be a human behavior specialist whose expertise lies in counseling, psychology, and also executive coaching. And so he specializes and his services are in terms of helping people in terms of self-sabotage, anxiety, depression, also self-doubt, and also relationship challenges as well, just to name a few. The man's also an established businessman, but more than that, he has an amazing story to share, an amazing journey to share at the table. So please put your hands together for the man himself, Hayden Brown!
Thank you for the intro. I try and live up to that.
Oh, no, thank you for coming here. No, we appreciate it. Thank you for your time. I know we're from Nelson and you're here in Tamaki Makaurau. And so I thought just to start the ball rolling, because human behavior specialist is like, hey, what is that? What does that mean? And what does that entail? And can you walk us through it? And what does it actually mean?
Sure. So I help people uncover the why behind their challenges, behaviour patterns, and in many cases, suffering. And, for me, what that means is really getting to, what is the root cause behind their challenges. So, if it's anxiety, it's actually, okay, what is unique about the situations where the anxiety is coming up and they're feeling triggered? If it's anger, again, very similar. What is unique about these situations? What's that unbearable feeling for you that comes up that triggers that reactive response? And the other thing would be just long-term patterns of behaviour. So, many people, and I assume you guys can relate to this as well, I think we all can, we get caught up in certain behaviour patterns, whether it's, we always attract a certain type of relationship, or, whether it's we feel that everyone takes advantage of us, or, we're not valued by others. There's patterns that inform all of our lives that often will keep repeating until we actually bring them conscious, bring them to the forefront, and really try and master our lives.
That's cool, because I like what you said in terms of patterns. How do you get to, obviously you specialize with with trauma and anxiety, depression. How does someone get to a point where they actually need to break that pattern or to change the mindset, so to speak? When they've said, hey, enough is enough, I need a change, and where do they get to that point, and how do they actually kind of make that change?
So it's obviously unique and case by case to everyone, but generally speaking, 9.9 times out of 10 it's pain, as in pain is the most powerful motivator we have, and in many cases that's an un-PC thing to say, because there's this sort of view of pain as this bad thing, and I'm sorry I've gone through that, and if I didn't go through this, my life would have been better. But my goal, and the thing that actually is really inspiring and rewarding to me, is often when I've finished with a client, they'll say to me, oh, I've learned so much about myself, and they've whether it's they've moved into a new career, or they've really learned to value themselves, they've learned who they are, they've broken free from certain patterns that maybe for them, when they reached out to me, it was affecting them in one domain, but then in our work together and unraveling it all, we realised that the full extent that it's been playing out over their whole life. And so the answer to your question is, again, pain is almost always the motivator, the why that gets people, that real catalyst, right, to change. But the thing that I love is actually appreciating that if it wasn't for that pain, we would very much just stay the same. One quick analogy I often give to clients, and we can go into this, but obviously I used to do, physical health work, personal training, nutrition. But a really good analogy would be, if you're a little bit chubby, a little bit overweight, everyone go, oh, you're not too happy with yourself, but you don't do anything about it. But, perhaps the day you look in the mirror and you are so dissatisfied or unpleased with how you look, often that's the day where actually you take action. And so, that can be a good example of, pain as that catalyst to really take the power back.
It's cool.
And when people react to pain in that way, why is it often short-lived? Because, people, like, that was a great analogy, because you're right. We look in the mirror and we go, oh, man, I feel fat today. And then we go, I'm going to the gym for the rest of the week. I'm not going to eat this. I'm not going to eat that. And then I notice, I'll do that for 3 days. Feel as if I've seen a bit of a difference. Mm-hmm. And then I just go back to normal. Like, hey, what is that cycle?
That's a great question. The truth is with that one, it is really just the amount of pain. And so, if for example, I often work with relationships, and someone might say, if I do X behavior one more time, my wife's going to leave me. If I, talk to her like that again, or if I, have a reaction at the kids, for example. And so for them, the pain is so immense that they know that if that happens again, they are going to lose what they value the most. And so there's a very big difference between, I should lose weight versus I would love to lose weight, for example, or, just that pain threshold. And we all have different pain thresholds, but it's also specific to what's most important to us. So, for example, there's a number of things that in one regard that I would like to do, but the reality is, if they're not high on my values, high on what's most important to me, then that pain of not doing those things is going to be nowhere near as significant as opposed to if there was a pain that was affecting my business or my client work, that would be much more impactful on me and more of a motivator, because that's higher on my values and my purpose.
So there's a level of tolerance, eh?
100%.
And so, because...
Well, what's painful to me could be different to you and Patia.
Yeah.
And so it ultimately, and this is something we'll get into, comes down to perception. But perception relative to our values, relative to what's most important to us.
Wow.
Imagine that we have these glasses that we put on, and they filter what we see, what we do, what we act on. I was saying to Patia before the show, I could tell you guys a joke, and he could love it, you could get offended, right? Hopefully not. But so is it the joke, or is it the meaning that we make out of these things? And so as humans, we have this incredible ability to make meaning out of anything, for better or worse. And again, those associations form what we value. They form these associations are responsible for what we get addicted to, for our fears, our anxieties, and to your question, for what is painful to us, and thus what we act on or what we don't act on.
Different for everybody, eh?
100%.
But then you've just said that people will act on it if that pain has a, whether it's a positive or negative relationship with the values that they have in place for themselves.
Yeah.
That's interesting. We've had a few guests come on the podcast, and one of their drivers has been the dark side. And I've always been
the shadow.
Oh, so you call it the shadow?
Look, I don't particularly reference that concept in my work, because I think there's a better way. But in Jungian psychology, there is a term called the shadow, which is very, very very well known, which we can get into. But
Yeah.
but you go and then I'll.
Yeah, no, because they've talked quite a bit about this dark side that's their driver, and they talk about pain and how that's a driver. And I'm quite fascinated by it, and I saw this book the other day, and it was called. I just ordered it; it hasn't arrived, so I haven't looked at it. But it's called The Dark Psychology, or The Dark Side of Psychology, and I was like,
Okay.
and I wanted to see it to see whether it was sort of related to where these guys were coming from. But when I hear them talk, I also hear, Michael Jordan, his coach, what's his name? His coach, the guy with the deep voice.
Phil, which one? Which one?
He's the coach that does all of his. Anyway, he drives.
Tim Grover.
Tim Grover. So Tim Grover talks about this dark side and get in touch with it and align yourself with it, because that's the part that will drive you into spaces that your other side might not. And so I hear this from some pretty amazing
That's a
men.
great point.
And so, what are your thoughts on that?
So
Is that sort of in alignment with pain?
Yes, it is also a whole conversation in itself.
Okay.
But let's get into it, because
Yeah.
there's a lot there,
Cool.
and it's often unaddressed. So the shadow in various forms of psychology, generally speaking, represents the parts of ourselves that we want to disown. For example, I wouldn't want to look greedy, or I wouldn't want to be seen to be all about money, or perhaps with men at the moment, they're self-aware of looking too aggressive, things like this. In reality, all of these qualities actually have a place in our lives, okay? Well, that's what I teach. So, for you to be an empowered man, you want to have that ability to be assertive and be aggressive, but obviously you want to actually integrate that into your being and, in a sense, time and a place, right? As opposed to that coming out reactively. So the shadow in Jungian psychology, in Jung's work, who's a famous psychoanalyst, he would say that the shadow, again, is the parts of ourself that we repress, that are icky, that we try and avoid. And the challenge with not addressing what we're referring here to as the shadow is that we push it down and try to get rid of it, but anything we repress will express itself in other ways uncontrollably.
Wow.
So, for example, if I was to say to you, I would never lie, I don't lie, etc., well, all that's happening is I'm creating a self-image or a fantasy about myself of how I want to be seen. It's not based on reality, because in reality, perhaps I'm happy to lie to my daughter that Santa Claus is real, or, often I'll have a client, I had a pastor once, and he said to me, I never lie, Hayden. And, I took great pleasure in helping him see that he acknowledged, I lied to the tax man because, I don't believe in that, or, ACC's different. And, there's no judgment from me, but the point is recognizing that actually all of these qualities, as icky as they can sound, actually can serve a place in our life. And to love and appreciate who you are in others, it's much wiser to find a place for all these qualities and own them, use them as fuel, to your point, as opposed to try and push them away. That would be the short of it.
Jeez.
What pushes it away? Is it society? Is it culture? Is it all that? Because church, is it because we can't control it? Because I've really come to see that how these amazing men, some of them well known, some of them not, have connected with that. And have talked about it, but have just kind of looked at it, not in the detail you have. And I really appreciate how you've just broken that down. But they quite often refer to it as their drive. And then when I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, and it's almost like they've just unleashed it. Like they're kind of saying, don't touch this, guys. Don't touch this. And you're right. There's this element of suppression. And does that come from?
Again, tapping into that and just acknowledging that it can have a place in your life and looking for where that can integrate into your life in a meaningful way, becoming whole, right? Like I said, rather than trying to cut off part of yourself, actually, bring it in. You were speaking just before, Patia, about a guest who was sort of quite forthcoming. I want money and these things. And you could say the social conditioning, perhaps from some of you guys in here, is, okay, do we say that out loud? But perhaps, I haven't watched the interview, but what I love about that is perhaps he's actually, what I would love, I haven't spoken to the guest, is that if he sees the value of him growing wealth and building money, and perhaps how he can be more empowered and serve others, and how, that's for him, perhaps whether he calls it greed or making money, maybe there's certain associations, whether it's church, society, culture, case by case, of course, but for him, actually finding a place and using that as fuel. I think many people in sports, going back to Michael Jordan, all that sort of thing, they perhaps have the first step acknowledged, which is, again, recognising it can be a fuel source. The part that I would add to it is just actually looking at the real value and bringing it into your life in a conscious way, as opposed to, it almost sounds like they're halfway there, sort of. It's still this dark thing called the shadow. It's still, we still want to be careful of showing it. Versus, again, what I would say is that we all, my mentor would say that, Dr. DeMartini would say that we all demonstrate all traits, okay? So we're all nice, we're all mean, we're all kind, we're all cruel, considerate, inconsiderate, late, on time. We all demonstrate all qualities across our life and across different areas of our life and across our values. And so it's much wiser to appreciate these qualities and how they show up rather than labelling them with other people's expectations, the church, government, society, etc.
That's cool.
That's cool.
What
would you say
that's what keeps us trapped, in our patterns, these idealisms.
What would you say to someone who, like, obviously you talked about suppression and people kind of suppress some of the actual traits. What do you talk about? What would you say to someone who's like, who doesn't give a damn? I don't give a damn. I'm gonna show the shadow every time. I don't care. I'm just gonna be upfront. I'll be abrupt and just tell her how it is. And so, what do you say about those individuals? And is that some sort of, because I've always wondered when I'm talking to individuals, is that some sort of a sign of narcissism or narcissistic traits?
Yep. It's a very good question, and we could go a lot into narcissism because it's a very popular thing that clients love to bring to me. He's a narcissist, and every man I've dated is a narcissist, etc. So we can get into that. They say, though, if you're asking, are you a narcissist, you're not, for what it's worth. So you're all right.
Are you sure, Hayden?
Give the guy a break.
Because there's different types, eh?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it'll be cool. Interesting. You tell us.
So we'll start with the first part of your question, Patea, which I believe was, someone. What I heard from that is almost someone who's unapologetically who they are. Right? They're bold. In one regard, they're saying, I don't give a whatever, this is who I am, etc. So in that case, and this is partly why I don't often lead with the word shadow, because perhaps for that person, there's no negative or dark association with it, right? They are just being themselves. They're happy being assertive and asking for what they want. If they're busy and, they come across as rude or short, that wasn't their intention. They didn't mean it. If someone wants to take it that way, that's on them. So the concept of the shadow and everything we spoke about is obviously very accurate, but sometimes I don't often lead with that word shadow because it sometimes can, again, still lean into the idea that it's these kind of dark, awkward qualities versus, to your point with that question, I think it was sort of, what's the psychology of that person and almost, in some regards, what would their life look like? The truth is, they're going to get a lot of praise, acknowledgement, recognition for being bold and being assertive, etc. They're probably going to achieve a lot because they know what they want. They're unapologetic in doing that. But that person will also attract a lot of criticism, challenge, etc. because, again, they are expressing all of those qualities in a really expressive, concentrated way, I guess. But that is life, right? That is life. Anyone achieving anything meaningful, it's you're in the limelight. It's, you're attracting, let's imagine I did 10 podcasts this week, the more someone's going to have a problem with something that I've said, right? Which would come as a result of me, me being perhaps bold and assertive and sharing what I believe to be the truth. So, there's a lot of value in that. And one way of thinking about it would be that's very much where I teach and educate my clients to get to, being clear on who they are and expressing those qualities in pursuit of their mission. But in that specific example that you said, perhaps that person would also attract challenge and criticism. But I wouldn't say that's bad. I would just say that perhaps that's because, again, a lot of those qualities are deemed as negative and they can be dark. But that's society's expectations. And, we can live by society's expectations and minimise ourselves and compare ourselves and beat ourselves up. Or we can live on purpose in alignment with what's most important to us.
It's cool. Good answer.
It is. Gosh, it just makes me wonder, how do you help someone understand, those traps that might be coming from society or whatever the source is. It could be all of it, and we live in such a multi-structured world. Where do you start? Like, where do you start with that? Like, where do you start? Like, where do you start? How do you help people break that down?
I hear you. So, to your point, it is very, very layered, right? There's so much that goes on, in our psychology. And where I start, and this is probably just almost the business person in me, I always start with actually what specifically do we want to achieve? Like if I'm working with someone, out of our time together, really what do we want to achieve? How do we know that we're on track, right? What are the KPIs, key performance indicators, right? That's how I like to start it, especially when a lot of people who do counselling or psychotherapy, coaching, all these things, it can often be, sometimes there's this feeling of going around in circles and no real resolution or movement, right? So I always start with getting really clear, if I was working with Patia, all right, Patia, what specifically, is the challenge? And some clients can articulate it, sometimes it starts vague, and from there we really unravel what it looks like and how it's playing out in their life. Once I've got that, then we can actually start to unravel that and get to what I call the root cause of that. That's a bit of an overview. The actual how I get to the root cause, we could speak on that for hours. So,
Yeah, okay.
But it starts with what the goal is and then looking at what are the incongruencies between their actions and those goals. And then from there looking at, what are the emotional distractions, fears, anxieties, long-standing beliefs, limiting beliefs is a very big one. Self-sabotage is something I work with. So once we've got the goal, we can look at what's the incongruent action and then we break down where does that action come from. One of the... Again, I could speak on this for hours, so I'll let you guys lead it with questions. But in a nutshell, it would be looking at what does the behaviour that isn't serving them, what does it represent and where is it coming from? So, for example, if someone is, they have a goal and they would love to perhaps spend more time with their family, is a common one. But then every week, it's the same old where they're, maybe they're prioritising their friends or their business and they're getting stressed out that way and they're putting these expectations on themselves. So for me, that would be, okay, so the goal is you'd like to be more empowered with your family. Your actions are, you are either self-sabotaging or prioritising other things in the business, drinking, so on. And then looking at what does that represent? And almost always... 99% of the time, again, it's these associations that we have, and these injected idealisms from others. I need to be successful. I need to get ahead. My dad only gave me recognition if I'm achieving. And so these patterns, they actually have a deep meaning that affect us, that influence us in our life. We often look at them and we go, this is bad or it's just a bad habit, when in actual fact, everything that we do, there's a reason for it. Now, is that the reason that we would like, or is that reason an abstract reason? Perhaps, but even with addiction, there's always whys behind it.
Yeah.
You touched on it. You said self-sabotage, and I often wonder, and maybe I don't know, maybe that's what I do sometimes for myself. I'm just speaking personally. But why do individuals who have a goal, who want to achieve these amazing feats, and they're almost there, then all of a sudden they self-sabotage? And I'm hearing this more often now. Yeah. So maybe you can kind of enlighten us in terms of why do individuals do that? And I know people are different, but why is self-sabotage becoming something that's coming to the forefront these days, in this day and age?
So I break self-sabotage down as an unconscious motive. Or consider that as an ulterior motive, that you're not conscious of. So, for example, you say consciously that you would love to, again, prioritise your weight, or let's say prioritise study and personal development, but then your actions, demonstrate that you're going out with your friends and you're partying, that sort of thing. And so it's easy to label these things as self-sabotage. And look, I use that word on my website because people know exactly what it means, and frankly I'm not seeing anyone else address it comprehensively. But actually what we're talking about here is a secondary goal or an ulterior motive that we're not conscious of. So we say one thing, but then our actions are acting out something else that's also important to us, or at least represents something that's important to us. in the example of what I just gave there before, I said, someone perhaps may have goals with their study, but then they self-sabotage, so to speak, go out drinking. Well, perhaps their social life and their relationships are really important. Now, do they need to go out drinking to do that? No, but perhaps with them not being fully conscious of their values and prioritizing their social life in a meaningful way, perhaps it comes out reactively. They're going to the pub, they're drinking to get their connection fix. So, is that bad, or is that them unconsciously looking for a way to fulfill what's important to them? And that's why, again, actually bringing all this conscious to where we can actually see what it represents. When we can understand ourselves and the motive and the why, then we can actually start to break it down and go, okay, is going to the pub every night, is that actually the most effective way to connect with my friends? Are these people actually my friends? That's a real case study that I shared. I had a client who had trouble with alcohol, and he was unable to break that. When we broke down his values and what was most important to him, his relationships and connections were the number one thing that was most missing in his life and most meaningful to him. And then it became very apparent to both of us that was what he got out of going to the pub every night. It would be the same group of people there. They felt like family. Now, when we broke that down, he would say, well, actually, Hayden, I know, they're just there because I'm spending money. And if I stop drinking and going, no one would probably notice. But for this client, unconsciously, there's an association there that, drinking is connecting with others, that sort of thing. So it's very layered, but with self-sabotage, there's an ulterior motive is what I'm saying. So bringing that to the forefront, acknowledging what are these often repressed or hidden parts of ourselves, very often coming from trauma and injected values from others, which basically just means the idealisms we're trying to live up to. When we can actually bring that to the forefront, then we can actually start to make change. But when we can't see these patterns and what they represent, they're running us without us knowing they're running us, and we label them.
So it's almost like when you say self-sabotage in that context, they'll set a goal, but really what's important is what they're doing over here. And so it's...
Or at least it represents something.
Yeah, it represents something more meaningful, more valuable than the goal that they've set in place.
Or I'll just add to that, it's an attempt to fulfill what's most meaningful.
Which the first thing that they've said? Oh, okay.
The ulterior motive.
Okay.
Almost always is.
So the activity that...
Yeah.
So the activity they engage in that gets them off track over here. Because I always... For some reason, I thought self-sabotage was like you get to a certain place, like a certain level, done all the hard yards, just about to get there, and then you just go, it's almost like you have a freeze moment and you're like, do I really want to do this?
So let's go off that example.
Yeah.
That's a great example. And it is, again, so many, we're speaking before about, I do other interviews and they're 4 minutes and they're sound bites. And I said, you can't go into all the nuance of it, right? So this is it. So, slightly different scenario, but let's say, for example, you had some, career goal, let's public speaking, for example, and, in many regards, you're taking meaningful steps towards it. It's really rewarding. But then when you get there, you get the opportunities, perhaps you withdraw. And, an obvious one I deal with that could be fear of failure, right? And so, you could say, well, I'm self-sabotaging and I'm not giving myself that opportunity to do what I'd love, but perhaps the ulterior motive is to keep you safe, to not make a mistake, to not look foolish in front of people, which, again, is that serving the things that are most important in your life? Not necessarily, but it perhaps does represent, an attempt to keep you safe or to not make a mistake. So, again, there's basically these coping mechanisms that we get caught up in.
Yeah.
From our past experiences. They're all trying to keep us safe.
Yeah. So when people get so far into it and there's a little bit more at stake than what they anticipated when they started the journey, and I guess when they say what's at stake, it's a lot more lost when you're just about to get there and then you're like, can I? And then they start to second guess and then... kind of go backwards.
Yeah. But that's interesting, Hayden, because some people, like Karen was saying, the example that some people, they get to this place and they're almost there, they're almost achieving their goal, and all of a sudden you have self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And there's I don't know, and I've heard this time and time before that some people say, oh, they feel like imposter syndrome, or they feel like, oh, I'm not good enough for this. I don't deserve this.
Yes.
And so obviously all that kind of plays into some of the reasons as to why people self-sabotage.
Multi-layered. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And one thing that we should really touch on, because it's crucial to all this work that I do, and frankly, it is crucial to understanding, the human condition is value systems, right? And so what we're talking about here is understanding what your values are, what is truly most important to you. Because if we have that real frame of understanding, what gives us that sense of purpose, then it's much easier for us to identify are our current actions, whether we label them as self-sabotage or not is irrelevant, but are these current actions and these patterns that we get caught up in, are they actually congruent and in alignment with the path that we want to take and that supports our values? And so we all live by an intrinsic set of values, whether we know it or not, the things that are most important to least important in our life. And these values dictate, what gives us the most energy, what we love to learn about, read about, really where we show up at our absolute best. And so if we are setting goals or expectations for ourselves that are someone else's values, not ours, or what we think is important to us, but perhaps, not actually sincerely aligned with our values, then that's another reason we can self-sabotage, or it's certainly a reason why we can feel like an imposter. So, for example, if I was to, judge myself on my ability to write, clinical psychology reports, well, perhaps I'd beat myself up. But in reality, that's not what I do. That's not what I want to do. That's not aligned with my values. And so, if I didn't have that clear framework of helping people really get to the root cause of their behaviour patterns and unravel that, then perhaps I'd be comparing myself to some psychiatrist who's established and is achieving, and good on them if that's meaningful to them, but that's not aligned with my values. And so just very important to early on, I think, in this conversation to understand that our values are going to dictate where we're truly most authentic, where we're most resilient. We actually use a completely different part of the brain where we're much more objective and we're not emotionally reactive, and to where a lot of these coping strategies and in many cases trauma responses from the amygdala, they don't fire off the same when we're actually using the prefrontal cortex, which comes online when we're doing and living by our values. So understanding our values is crucial to understanding self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, and the expectations that we're putting on ourselves.
That's powerful. Gosh, that's so powerful. Because
you see why I don't like 4-minute interviews.
Hey, man, hey, you got all day, you got all time for.
So, how many people do you think live their lives never really knowing what their values are because they've been taking on board other people's values, their family values, their cultural values, or values that have just been handed over to them, and they've just taken them on? And I can imagine if they don't fit with you, how you're made up, that you could live this life just going. I mean, you use that word incongruent.
Incongruent.
You could live this life just going, what the fuck? Like, something doesn't fit.
Well, and guess what? We label that as depression.
Do you?
Man.
I don't.
Society does.
Society does.
Yeah.
I'm
glad you don't.
No,
That's cool.
I certainly wouldn't. But,
Gosh.
I mean, you cannot be depressed and fulfilled in your values at the same time. It's one or the other. People who and look, I'm not minimizing depression by any means, but what I'm saying is if you are depressed and you get crystal clear and take the time to really look at your actions and understand what's most important to you, and you start to take meaningful steps in alignment with that give you that sense of purpose, etc., the symptoms of depression will change. It's the feelings and emotional states that we have are considerate physiological feedback of, are we aligned with what's most important to us? I'm getting energy and coming alive here because I love sharing the work. If I was speaking about accounting or Microsoft Excel, perhaps I'd be asleep by now. So
you might get depressed if you.
Yeah. And here's the great thing, right? My accountant, bless his soul, Matt String, I hope he likes Excel because he's doing my bookwork. But, so for him, he's got a different value structure. So he can be in the bookwork and be in the accounting, and working out those problems in his area is actually really engaging and rewarding to him. to me, there would be a different physiological response to where I'd probably, again, retreat, or maybe I'd get anxious because now past dynamics of fear of failure are coming out because again, the accounting and the Excel work isn't important to me. So again, you're sort of seeing that the values proposition and are we acting in alignment with our values is really the most important thing in understanding yourselves, your behaviour patterns, emotional mastery. Because if you're not aligned with your values from the very get-go, you're basically putting other people's expectations on yourself, or your father's, or your parents, or the churches. I got a lot of clients that use the phrase they're a recovering Catholic, which is hilarious. But so if you're not clear and at least in the ballpark of what your values are, then you're going to have these symptoms that, again, traditional medicine will call, you've got general anxiety disorder, you've got depression. But like I said, in my work, I want to work out what is off, what is the expectation or incongruent that is resulting in those symptoms. And it starts with values.
That's interesting. Because you think about the amount of people, and more so a lot of our young people, you're talking about highly depressed, high anxiety levels. And so you're actually saying that if your values you align yourself with your values, and you who you are in terms of your values, there's going to be the depression levels, or even the depression stats would dramatically go down.
Hugely, yeah.
Wow.
I'm careful what I say here, of course, because I'm not minimising depression, but there's certainly a correlation between, I work with depressed people all day, and they're not clear on. For what it's worth, just to go back to your actual question, we went down some rabbit holes there. Was do people know their values?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, no. I can't think of one client I've ever worked with who was crystal clear on their values when they first came to see me. And I work with a lot of very empowered, self-aware people. I do work with everyone from all walks of life, but I do work a lot with executives and people that are very purposeful. And even then, there's often just distinct insights about truly what they value. Just little things like, for example, is it, business for business's sake, or is it problem solving? Is it that you love painting, or is it creative expression? And that's multiple different areas in your life, perhaps like yourself, Patia. So just those little distinctions are really important with understanding yourself. And no, most people don't know what their values are.
Yeah.
And so if they can start with that, and we can get into perhaps, shortly, if you like, how the audience can start getting clear on what their values are, their priorities are. But again, if they can get clear on those values and start to take actions that support that pathway to fulfillment in those areas, then again, I'm yet to see someone who is depressed and aligned with their values at the same time.
Can I just ask, is that value system you're talking about, is that the foundation of a person's self-esteem?
Correct. Their self-worth, their whole, one way to think about it would be your whole identity, in fact, revolves around your value system. So, for me, my highest value is essentially, the short of it is problem solving, right? So obviously I do that in a very specific way, but I absolutely love problem solving and working that out. And so, if we go back to that accounting example, if, let's say, for example, that my father was a New Zealand's best accountant. And so by looking up to him, I'm now comparing myself to him and his achievements. And now I'm going down a path of accounting to try and appease his value system. Well, now I'm depressed. Not because there's anything wrong with accounting. Again, sorry, Matt Stringer, my accountant. Not because there's anything wrong with accounting, but because that's his value structure, not mine. And so again, understanding that is just crucial.
Yeah, that's so cool, because I think identity, from a Māori context, a Pasifika context, like we talk about the hauora and the holistic well-being, and we talk a lot about identity being the whenua, right, of the person's hauora. But that's still a question that's sort of like up in the air, because you can answer it from a cultural context. You can root it with the values of culture that has been agreed upon by a collective.
Yes. Well, there's a big difference between individual identity and group identity,
yes,
right? And we could, go into that in a number of ways, politics, etc. But really, again, to your point, our self-worth is based on our alignment with our values. Now, that doesn't mean that, let's say my goal is to, speak in front of stage to 10,000 people. That doesn't mean that I can't feel good until I've done that, but it means that perhaps me even just learning public speaking or taking meaningful steps again that are aligned with my values and purpose and highest expression of that, I can actually feel purposeful and fulfilled that what I'm doing is equating on that journey, right? So our self-worth, our self-esteem is based on our alignment with our values. Again, actions speak louder than words. Very much. And
I love this conversation because when we're talking about identity in that context, and what we're learning tonight is we take on a collective blanket, and then you find yourself in other spaces where you're not in the collective. You're now and then you almost...
That's where the potential is.
Yes, yeah. And you sit there and you kind of go, that's not working for me right now. Like I need it. And then you start to question. And
that's where that pain can become the catalyst. Just going back to what we said before. So perhaps, I've got a client recently who's just left a cult. And, can you imagine, the pain of, he left, but he had to leave his family and his daughter to do so, and then he had to leave the family business. He's being judged for that, but in that pain is the opportunity for him to become his own individual and fulfill what's most important to him. It's not easy, but there's that potential there.
Yeah,
Jung would call it the process of individuation, which means becoming your own individual, free from the expectations of others in society, differentiating yourself and becoming your own person, which again is completely different to group identity or what in some realms of psychology is called the collective unconscious. So that can be, again, society's expectations, beliefs, whether they're spoken about or not. Again, we don't do that, that's bad. We don't talk about money, we're not about that. Again, all of these expectations from the collective can influence us. But again, becoming our own individual and individuating in alignment with our values creates a meaningful identity that actually creates inspired action.
Because even in the collective, right, where we have these shared values, there are times where I'm struggling because I don't want to do that. I don't want to act that way. I don't want to wear this.
Or eat that food, as we were speaking about before.
Or eat that food because, we're...
Yeah.
And
Go on, have some, right? It's a good example.
You don't want to eat that food because you don't want to be rude. So you're incongruent in that moment. But I'll be straight up. Like I quite often will walk off and I'll have a bit of a reflection and in my own mind, I'm like, is that your self-esteem? Where the F is your self-esteem? Like you can't just stand up in the collective where you share all of these beliefs and values, that you can't just stand up and say no and be okay with the that's rude. Like and I wondered, and I have wondered, is it myself? And I always say to people, is it self-worth or self-esteem that is just so isn't as solid that I can't just say nah, or I can't just say no, I don't really want to eat that, or I don't want to do that, I don't want to say this, actually this is what I think. So I'm really enlightened by what you're saying here today, that the foundation of our self-esteem and self-worth goes back to that value system.
Yeah. And your certainty and conviction behind that. Yeah.
But how many of us have been given the opportunity to explore it? Because there's going to be there might be a trade-off. And like I know,
that's a good point. You might be ostracized socially, or you could be.
Can I handle that?
Exactly, and that is why many of us, we stay in a job we hate. We put up with friends who perhaps minimize us or don't support. Perhaps don't want the best for us. They say that a true friend, if you tell them something great in your life, they don't try and make it about them. They don't try and say, I did this. They're actually genuinely happy for you. And on the flip side, if you say something that you're struggling with, they actually hold that and feel that with you. Again, they don't make it about themselves. And so, again, there is so much opportunity here to align ourselves with the relationships we want, the career we want, etc. But that does actually mean breaking away from the collective and those collective idealisms. And so, as much as I, clearly preach and educate people about becoming their most sincere, authentic, ultimately fulfilled self. The flip side, of course, is I can very much empathise with people who aren't there yet and want to get there, because the truth is there's benefits that we're extracting out of staying the same. So, for example, with yourself, I work a lot with people pleasers. I'm not saying you're one, but perhaps we're all one on a scale.
I play that card.
Okay, great. That's very good, and that's good acknowledgement. And so we could say that the drawback is, maybe you're a bit full coming this interview, or you're bloated, or maybe you had some gluten and that doesn't agree with you. But the benefit of that is actually, you're able to connect or not make a scene, or there's actually benefits that you're getting out of it. And so that would be an example of your earlier question, where do you start? Perhaps. Again, I'm just assuming here, but if you were anything like some other woman I work with, you might say, Hayden, I feel like everyone takes advantage of me, and I feel like I spend my whole life looking after other people, and when's it my turn? But then in actual fact, perhaps when we break that down, we actually find that maybe they were never acknowledged, by their father, and the coping strategy they took on was to try and appease him or appease other people, and to or avoid conflict, etc. And that was their way of trying to get love or get acknowledgement, recognition from those they care about. And so that pattern just plays out throughout their life. They blame other people. They don't understand why they're repeating these same cycles, why they're in this position, but actually there's a hidden motivation behind it.
Yeah.
And so it's two-pronged approach: understanding your values and where you'd love to be, and understanding the patterns that are playing out, and then looking at those two and the incongruencies, and then breaking down where those ulterior motives are coming from.
Yeah. That's so powerful.
Yeah, that is. What's even more interesting, Hayden, is because you talk about values, and there's a lot of people who have their values. We can talk about cultural values, and people are like, these are my cultural values, and so forth.
Yeah.
And then
what are their values?
What are their values? And so, I can imagine you can have all these values, with your environment, your upbringing, and background, and so forth, cultural values. But you're looking at this day and age. You're looking at social media. All these social media platforms and all these things, all these voices here, left, right, and centre. And I can imagine the confusion in terms of values and people's, all this different input, and then people get lost. So how do you kind of give us some tips? Because you mentioned tips.
Right.
How do you start to decipher these are my actual values, as opposed to these values that I've been raised up to believe in, but now that I'm older, I don't believe in these anymore.
Or again, these are my father's values.
Yeah, these are my father's values. Yeah. So give us maybe for the viewers and the listeners, because I can guarantee they'll be like, oh, please,
Definitely.
Hayden, give us some tips.
Of course. Well, if you're comfortable, Batia, let's look at your life.
Yeah,
okay, because it's it's going to work best off a case study, right? No, nothing too vulnerable here. Don't worry, yet. So
you're gonna make me cry.
I actually did a show with someone yesterday, and I did. So, but he asked. To be fair, he said he wanted to break through. So
cool.
Okay, so the first principle is, I think, that everyone needs to understand is actions speak louder than words, right? So as I've sort of alluded to a number of times today, even if our actions aren't what we want, or we perceive them as self-sabotaging, ultimately they represent something. They're at the minimum a coping strategy. So, for example, as I was saying earlier, it might be, what do you spend your money on? I spend my money on dinners out. But then we would look at, well, what is the purpose of dinners out? Oh, it's business networking. Okay, so that represents business opportunities. Or it might be, I spend too much money on coffee. Okay, what's the context? Oh, it's, I'm dating perhaps, and creating a family is important. So it's the first principle with value systems is understanding that your actions are always demonstrating what is truly most important to you.
Wow.
Which is really incredible, because again, it's almost like we're looking externally for this guidance and for who are we. Well, many of my male clients are looking for, this mentor or father figure to come in and give them all the answers. I can understand that. But again, that would simply be the other individual's values, not their values. Okay? And we'll get into how values are formed, etc., a bit later on if you like. But first and foremost, identifying them. Actions speak louder than words. So I use a process which the audience could look up, which is called the values determination process, and that is by, again, my mentor, Dr. John D. Martini. So that is a 13-point questionnaire that goes through a huge amount of questions to actually really break down and distill what your actions demonstrate, okay? But what we'll do, like I said, is we'll do a bit of a case study and I'll break some of those down for you. So first question for you, Patia, is what are the things, top 3 things, please, and we'll talk it out, that give you the most energy? Top 3 things that give you the most energy.
There's energy. Definitely my family, obviously my wife and my kids.
He has to say that.
I reckon.
Yeah.
Is that society's value?
Yeah, no, it's just
Great
it is.
question.
Yeah, but definitely my wife and kids in terms of energy. So anything that that's the most valuable.
Great. So
family, kids, creativity.
Yes.
Yeah, when I feel creative, I'm energized.
Okay.
And sports.
Awesome.
Yeah, sports. Yeah, sports. Those 3 things.
Okay, great. And the good news is, just straight off the bat, there's a some degree of alignment, because I read your bio on the Mandate website before I started, and it referenced all 3 of those things: creativity, sports, family man. So very good.
Cool.
Okay, next question would be top 3 things you love to learn about. Now, it's not it's not necessarily formal study. This could be YouTube, talking to a friend, Facebook, but topics, ideas, concepts you love to learn about.
Oh, mate. I think the list, I loved...
Take your time.
Yeah, no, I think if anything, not politics, but I think I loved... I love watching in terms of, if it's YouTube, I love looking at clips that kind of go against the grain in terms of, and it's not conspiracy theory, but I kind of like it.
We all like a good conspiracy theory.
People kind of think that way. It's more kind of touching on the woke kind of subjects. So I like to kind of
we can talk about that.
all that kind of stuff. Oh, okay, so because I'm always kind of trying to think for myself and search for myself. Is this true? Is this true? I want to know if this is true. So a lot of those topics on YouTube, and sports, obviously sports, and music. Music, yeah.
Brilliant. So sports, music, again, what I also do is, as I'm going through this process with clients, and what the audience can think about is, again, we're thinking, what do these answers represent, right? So it's not per se just the answer, it's what the answer represents. The real meaty one there would be what you mentioned before about, sort of things that go against the grain. So we don't have to go into all the intricacies of that, of course, but in a nutshell, what's the essence of that, Patia? Would we sort of say it's, how things work? Would we say it's, in one sense, it could be a branch of personal development or understanding yourself? What would you say to that? What's the why behind it?
The why? Yeah, that's a good question. I think the why really is for me is things that I used to believe in, things that I trusted, and things that I thought were true. And I've tested it for myself, and I realized, this is there's more to it, and I've come to the realization that no, I need to research. I need to look this up for myself. I need to study this for myself and look at it from different perspectives. Is this true? Have I been taught a lie? Have I been duped? And that's one thing. I don't want to be duped. I don't want to be suckered and think, oh man, I've been doing this for years, and realize down the track, man, I got tricked.
And I'll ask you a question which we'll circle back around to later. I would suggest that you perceive that you've been duped in the past.
Yes, I have. 100%, Hayden, you're absolutely right.
And we'll come back to why that is, but there's a principle that we can talk about with voids, which is where our values come from, which is essentially what we perceive as most missing. So the things in our life that we perceive as most missing, most unfulfilled, the things that we really, in your case, don't know, they become the things that are the most rewarding to us in the pursuit of that. So if you felt like you were duped and you thought this was the path, or then it becomes, well, what is the path? Let's actually go on. That's a really meaningful journey. If you perceive perhaps that you didn't take sporting opportunities that were important to you growing up, then that becomes important to you now. If your father perhaps wasn't there for you, then you being the father that you would love to have becomes the most important thing. So circle back round to it. We're getting straight into it now, but there's a principle which many are just blown away by and overlook in psychology, which is that the things that we perceive as missing become the things that are the most important. We'll move on with the questions. The next question for Tia, full session here, is what are your most consistent long-term goals? So what are the goals that you've had across your life that you've been the most consistent in working towards?
I think business. Obviously, it's been business.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been the best at it, but it's always been something that I've always, and obviously entrepreneurship and so forth, is always something that I've always kind of chased, but also at the same time, the same token, I feel like, man, maybe I'm not cut out for it.
Okay.
But it's always been something that, obviously, my wife and I, she could attest to this, but something that I always wanted to chase. But I felt like, nah, you're not the business guy. You don't have the business acumen.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just realizing now that, hey, you have it. You just gotta walk in it,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak.
Can I take I'm going to, obviously I psychoanalyze people for a living. I would suggest, tell me if I'm wrong, please, the difference now is that the business that you're in really has that creative aspect, and also you almost that sort of search for truth. Your mantra is nothing's off the table. You've got people here, you're having raw conversations. It's the creative aspect, which has come up in every one of those questions that I just asked you, and also that other, what's looking like a value that's sort of, well, what does that mean? What is that, and what is the path? Certainly, I'm not too sure about your other business ventures and what you do outside of the podcast, but certainly this show is the essence of those answers you've given. Perhaps the businesses you've run in the past are expectations on yourself of what business should look like or what you should do or achieve, but they weren't supporting the values like they are now.
Mate, you're good, man.
You see why the values framework is so absolutely crucial.
You're good, man. You're good. You're right. I think in the past, I couldn't try to force myself. Maybe try to mold myself. This is how it should be. But no, because there's an element of creativity, and they've been in the past other ventures, but I think more so this time around. And you're right in terms of where I'm at in my life right now, in terms of seeking truth, and also just a real search for answers. And because it's coincides with the creative space,
yes,
I feel that I'm more confident than before.
And so, and this is why I love case studies, right? Because there's so much wisdom and great nuggets in that. So many principles that we already spoke about today. So one is, again, your self-worth revolving around those values, right? So, I would probably suggest that you taking these actions, making these moves in business that support these values, you probably feel much more certain about who you are as a man, the value you offer others, and also your own intrinsic value, probably more than ever, based on that alignment.
I know.
And again, in the past, let's say perhaps you were depressed or you perceived there wasn't that purpose, etc. Again, there's that contrast between that alignment with your values, right? You're putting other expectations on yourself in business. And, I'm also not going to say that journey is bad. I think that would be naive, because that's got you to where you are now. But again, if we then go and so many principles, right? That pain is that catalyst for you to take action to eventually become more aligned with your values. And then your psychology and your physiology, your self-worth represents and comes in alignment with that, which is where you are now.
It's good. It's good.
So we'll round off the values questions. So one more, okay, is where are the areas in your life where you're the most ordered and organised? And I'm not saying, often a lot of men struggle with this. They go, oh, Hayden, I'm not organised. What do you, no, please, I'm not, trust me. I had one guy last week and he was telling me he was not organised anywhere. And his other questions were hunting and fishing, right? What gives you energy hunting and fishing? And so I said to him, tell me about your hunting and fishing. Oh, my workshop and everything's got a place and this is where this gun goes. So again, actions speak louder than words, and we will automatically have structure and organisation around our values, right? Because we want to, because it's most meaningful to us. So that said, where are you most ordered and organised?
With this podcast, I think,
Exactly.
with this podcast, I make sure that, I try my best to make sure that everything's done properly. And
you offer me a coffee?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Podcast, and also family time as well, but also with sports. It's just, but I think if I had to narrow it down to one thing, it's this.
Yeah.
And I like to be organised in terms of, and I'm one of those individuals that I need to write things down. If I write them down, then I guarantee you that it'll be done. If I don't write them down, I'm floating everywhere.
And so, one key thing that I would suggest there, again, tell me if I'm wrong, is that, it's not per se this idea that you have to be organised or you should be organised. It's you want to be organised because you value the work, you value the show. It's an expression of your values. And so, again, if you're not clear on your values, then you go, I'm not organised, I'm not achieving, and you judge yourself because you're not honouring who you are and where you're actually taking really purposeful action automatically.
It's good.
So if we look at, if I was working with a client or if they did the questionnaire online, you'd start to see certain patterns coming out in these answers, right? So let's test my memory. So we had family come up a couple of times. We had a number of different answers for various forms of creative expression, and then 2 times we sort of had almost that sort of search for truth, right? So we'd get to the end of the process, and then we would really want to put a word or a phrase to each of those values, and perhaps we could do that now, or just perhaps give a shorter version of it for the audience. But maybe we call it personal growth and truth, creative expression, family, sports. That's who Patea is.
Is that true?
I don't know, is it?
Mate, no, there's obviously, yeah, and also my faith kind of plays a big part in it as well. So
yeah, and that's partly why, to be fair, the full questionnaire is 13 questions, and we go through it in much more depth. So those other answers would come out as well, if that makes sense. I just asked you 4. So, I would believe that your faith is important to you. But the point is that our actions speak louder than words. And if you ask the right questions and, look at your life, you'll actually filter out the expectations you're putting on yourself and other people's values versus what is truly you.
That's good. And you know what? It makes you really wonder as well, Hayden. Obviously with these values that we have as individuals and as a collective, and I'm a true believer in purpose. So I can imagine that why there's a lot of men or a lot of people in general who are depressed because a lack of purpose.
Well, I'll just jump in and say that sense of purpose is our values. So I could take it a step further and say our purpose is a synthesis of those values. So, I always, in many cases, I love it if clients are willing to write a mission statement about what they dedicate their life to. If you were to write a mission statement, you don't have to do one now live, don't worry. But if you were to write one live, it would probably be about, you're on your own search for truth, wanting to offer that to others, to support your family along the way. And it would be a statement and a direction in life that literally reflects those values that we just started determining today. So just to make it clear, the values and purpose go hand in hand. The purpose is, again, a synthesis of those values.
It's good, man.
Quick question. Just from the side.
Please.
How do you make values? I mean, how do you make good values? How do you make values that will help improve your life, I guess? Because it sounds like values are the bedrock of everything for the most part.
Yeah. So let's go back to what I touched on a little bit before, which was the idea that values actually come from voids, right? And we'll just, we're probably well past this, but I'll just make the distinction that when I'm talking about values, I'm not talking about trust, love, integrity, honesty. It's not that those aren't important, but I've never met anyone that's what gets them out of bed in the morning. I can't wait to be honest today. Who can I show integrity to? Can I show integrity to you? Can I show integrity to you? So those are very much just implied along the way. So if I use me as an example with problem solving, and I say this to my clients, like my goal isn't to sit here and and I'm not thinking how can I be more honest? How can I show them more integrity? I'm thinking how can I help them solve their problems, because that's what I value. And it's just implied along the way that I want to have integrity with what I say and do, be honest, etc. So just making that distinction of what we're not talking about. But so values come from voids, and voids is what we perceive as most missing. okay? And the key word there is perceive. So, for example, if I perceive that I'm not very good with finances and I'm not very, financially literate, and I associate pain with that, then that becomes what's most meaningful and energizing, purposeful to me. If I perceive, well, I'll give you an example with me. If I in my younger years, I was very overweight. I had a lot of health challenges, and I had a number of voids around my health. I had insomnia, I had low testosterone, I had depression at many times, and then again I was overweight. I also had high heavy metals, and so there was all these voids around not understanding my health and the human body. And it's not a coincidence that the first business I started was a gym. Right, so though that that void around not understanding that, and that's where that principle I could tell straight away with you. You felt like you've been duped in the past, or beliefs that didn't serve you. Whatever. Those voids and the perception of something's missing becomes what's most important. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can values expire?
Yes, that is a great question. I've never thought of it as the word expire. That's very interesting.
It's just when you put void and values together, I just thought
I see
if that is replacing the void and you find fulfillment, you're able to resolve that void, would you then go, because I'm just thinking about my work and why I do it, and I'm like, there are times where I don't want to get out of bed and I'm thinking, have I just now maybe resolved that? And now and maybe that value has now become expired, and now Definitely. I need to find another one.
Yeah. The other scenario, and I'll lead with this, is that, that value can become less important. And so perhaps for the first half of your life, it's the number one thing. And then as it becomes more fulfilled and essentially you perceive it's less missing, in some cases it completely drops off, and I'll cover that, but in some cases it might just drop down the values hierarchy. So, for example, with me, business in one sense used to be my highest value for 8-9 years. I've brought and I've founded and sold a number of businesses that were really meaningful to me. And so business is still very important to me. It's partly why I often work with a lot of business owners, because it also supports that value. But because I've fulfilled a lot of that, it's dropped down, right? And so, naturally then this value of the problem solving comes up, hence the journey I'm on now. So the if we think about the voids values concept, what we perceive as most missing becomes most important. And as we fulfill these values, they either drop down the hierarchy or they drop off completely. In the same way, again, I had voids around my weight and health, and I founded a gym and a supplements company, and that was very meaningful. And, my health is still on my hierarchy of values now. I'm still very disciplined in that area. But in many regards, I fulfilled all those questions that I had. I know what supplements to take. I prioritize training, a number of things. Yes, I could be better, of course, but for the most part, I've fulfilled that, right? And so that identity shift, going back to identity, that value of health drops down the hierarchy, and my identity evolves with the next thing that I perceive as most missing.
That's cool. That's so cool. And I think it's important to prepare for that, because then you can get a bit stagnant, and in your being stagnant, you can get incongruent again. Definitely. and then you're like,
Yeah, no, that's a great. I mean, I this sounds like very, very privileged problems, but it's just a very good case study, right? So I probably get one call a month from a business person who's worked their whole life to build a business and sell it. They've sold it. Maybe they've sold it for $2 million. They thought it would be the best day of their life. It's the worst day of their life, because all of their sense of purpose has been around, that business. They've sold it because, perhaps that was what they thought, that was an injected value or idealism. Oh, you want to build it up, sell it, do something else. And I could again break this down in many different layers of if that was the right decision for them or not. But again, they're calling up because they've, in one sense, fulfilled that value, right? And then there's this existential crisis, this midlife or existential crisis, where now they have to refine that purpose in other values, existing values, or perhaps something else comes up.
Are there life stages that we go through? And I know this is a men's podcast, so like, are there? Okay, two questions. Are there stages of life where we encounter that more? Like you just said, midlife crisis, because that was my next question. Is midlife crisis when you're sort of like, oh, done all of that and feeling that incongruency? And then is it different for men and women?
That's a great question. I think many people would likely say yes and speak to that. I probably wouldn't focus on that too much, just because I would probably say, again, as you've probably got the feeling, and as we spoke about before, I really like that depth and that sort of case by case, right? So you are likely very, very right, but I tend to focus more on, let's say you were having this existential crisis, I would really want to understand the nuances with that. And ultimately just go straight into realigning, your values. I personally wouldn't spend the time going, oh, well, actually, there's a multitude of women at this time of their life, because the way they make change and align with their values is going to be so individualized to them anyway, that I don't see the value in grouping them in with other generalizations of this generally happens at this time.
It's almost like a cheat sheet, eh? Because, I think in my 20s, you'd always hear about this midlife crisis thing. Mainly from media, not so much from my mum and dad, but mainly from media. And then in my workplaces that I was in, I'd always hear about the empty nest syndrome.
Yes.
And my oldest is 19 and I've got a 14-year-old, I've got a few more years. But, they've always said, don't lose yourself, because that time is going to come, whether you like it or not, and you better know who you are. And don't forget the husband who's also part of that cycle. Yeah. So then, you kind of, when you're looking ahead, and we're kind of like in the middle now, but when you're looking ahead, you kind of anticipate these stages of life.
Yeah.
Midlife crisis hasn't quite hit. Maybe because midlife crisis has moved. maybe a decade forward.
Or maybe because you're on purpose. Why does there need to be midlife crisis? I'm not planning on having one.
Yeah, I don't want one.
Yeah.
I like doing what I like.
Good. And, if you, hopefully, take some things from today and, really take the time, every 6 months or so perhaps to look at, what are the things that give you energy, look at your actions, because, again, their values subtly change over time. They tend to either subtly change over time or they change with big cataclysmic life events, i.e., someone dies, you get fired from your job, certain challenges that really give us a really big contrast in our life and again create voids that again shape values. But to your point there, I don't want to overlook what you've just said, because again, as much as I almost just want to go straight to it. All right, let's break you down and get you purposeful and back on track again, right? But you are very much right that clearly, I couldn't count the amount of mothers that I've worked with, their children move out, their whole purpose, right, their value structure has been around, supporting the children. Great, nothing wrong with that. The children, are now off to university. Great, job well done. That value, in a sense, in that primary form in that example has been fulfilled. And so now there is, again, that midlife or existential crisis. And so there's so many examples of that we could give. So you're certainly not wrong with that.
Yeah.
But again, kind of in the premise of what we're talking about with the collective identity or the individual identity, I just get straight into that.
Yeah, that's cool. And I guess I'm thinking about who's in the room. Like we've got young Kiona over here who hasn't... Have you got a girlfriend, Kiona? Just kidding.
He's got two, I think.
And then you've got Brad over here. All his kids are under 11, Brad? Yeah. And then you've got us whose kids are almost out the door. And we're all looking ahead. Like you're looking ahead and you kind of hear these stories growing up and you're like, okay, get ready for this, get ready for that, get ready for whatever.
And it's wise to anticipate that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because you can only be thankful when someone's shared their pain with you and then they turn around and give you a lesson with it.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go, cool, thanks for that. I'm going to pocket that. I'm going to make sure I don't lose myself in this mothering process.
Well, if we think, that again, there's clearly going to be these points in life where we feel purposeless and where we're redirecting ourselves and we're working out who we are. But the turnaround time, you could say, and the reorientation, doesn't have to be 2 years or 2 months. It could be 2 weeks, right? And so you being self-aware enough to know, okay, the children are moving out, what else is important to me? And taking the time to reflect on that and sort of, be prepared for that. I would suggest that's very wise. I do think that, for people who are currently going through suffering or feeling, that real lack of purpose, etc., they don't need to have that foresight by any means. Like I said, I would really suggest them to consider that pain, again, is the most powerful motivator. And again, we can view and perceive pain as bad, and and that we're oppressed and we're the victim, or we can actually acknowledge that yes, that there is clearly challenges, trauma, and these things exist, but also look at the potential of what we can take from it and how we can become more purposeful, more on purpose.
Yeah.
Cool.
You've answered so many questions that I think people spend their life journey trying to answer, like who am I?
We're trying to figure out.
What is my purpose?
Well, that's what got me into this.
We're trying to figure out.
Tell us your story. What is your why? Like, how did you get here? Because I wanted to ask that right at the beginning, but we kind of got straight into the
Sorry
mahi.
about that.
But like, what is your why, and how did you start? Because this is not for everyone. This kind of mahi is not for everybody. So how did you get to this point where you were like, I really want to learn this stuff. I want to help other people? That sounds real cliche.
No,
Can we break that down a bit?
I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. So like many of us, and in many regards, perhaps the story is more can be a bit more in depth and impactful now because we've broken down so many principles that I teach, right, around voids, which again translate to values, etc. So, growing up, in many times of my life, I was disengaged, disinterested, in some regards depressed. Again, not knowing who I was, where I fitted in, what was most important to me. And in hindsight, the reason for that is, again, what most of us do, just comparing myself to other people, right? I'm just thinking the best way to tell the story, right? Because I've got the story itself, and then I've got all the lessons I've learned along the way. Do I give each lesson? How do the story, we can perhaps go to the lessons as we go. But so just not so much of my self-worth as a young man. I remember starting at primary school would just be around what others thought of me. It's everyone I think can relate to. Everyone wants to be popular at school. Everyone wants to fit in, etc. And so, starting off at primary school, I really just remember perceiving that, I was on the outside group and I didn't have that acknowledgement and those friend circles that I looked up to with other people, and so that continued across high school. The difference with the high school was I developed a coping mechanism called humour. And so, perhaps I couldn't be, the smartest or, the most attractive, but, if I can make you laugh, that can actually be a way that we can connect. Wow. And I think I saw that in your previous interview with Ed, on the thumbnail.
Yes.
So I haven't watched the interview, but I saw the thumbnail and he spoke about, that can mask trauma, and he's very right with that. So, it first started with, so much of my self-worth and self-esteem being wrapped up in, am I in with the popular kids and these things? Obviously I wasn't. And, that pain, again, becomes a fuel, a resource at your disposal, right, to navigate life. And so, it started with humour. And, I used to be a lot funnier, you could say. Obviously not a comedian now, but so I, used humour and theatre, sports and improv, at college, and that was meaningful. But I still had these deep self-worth challenges. And I think I alluded to earlier that at school, again, across much of my life, I had, health challenges, overweight, etc., hormonal problems, testosterone, etc. And so again, that created that was the most prevalent void at that time in my life around my physical body, right? And so, long story short, a number of years in between, of course, but the first the first real sense of purpose that I found in my life was when I went to the gym, you know, and I signed up to City Fitness. I was probably 17, you know, signed up to City Fitness, and it really gave me a great sense of empowerment and working on myself, and almost a personal development fix in a sense that I value now and support others in, but in that real physical domain. And so with that being the first thing that had really given me purpose in my life, I'm like, I'm all in. So, you know, studied to become a personal trainer, went all in on that, worked at City Fitness for probably 5 years. And then it became apparent to me, the next evolution of the void, same void but a different lens on it, you could say, was, well, you know, there's so many aspects to one's health. I've lost all this weight, but I've still got certain challenges. I've still got insomnia. I've still got, you know, hormonal challenges. Actually, hold on, there's nutrition and environmental medicine and holistic health, you could say. And so then that became the next value or the void that I was looking to fulfill. And so the idea of understanding integrative health and functional medicine and, you know, all the intricacies of how our health can come together, right? You know, how are you sleeping, digestion, all of these different factors, right? And so that was the next evolution of my purpose and values hierarchy. And I founded a gym or health club with a business partner of mine at the time, Zane. And we did that for 9 years. And the concept of Inner Strength was to really bring together all of those modalities. And so we had, you know, personal trainers, chiropractor, nutritionist, and then even natural medicine doctors that would have be able to do the blood tests for our clients and really offer a sort of full holistic health package. And so that was unbelievably, you know, rewarding to me. Again, one insight again is all of that came from pain, right? Of overweight, unsure where I fit in, and then actually, you know, how do I actually, you know, again, become my own individual and also solve these voids at the same time. So that was my start in business, and in many regards my start in the health space. Again, a number of different sort of roles there. And then, you know, in running my own business and working with clients, I started to see, you know, everything we've spoke about today. There'd be the clients who say they want something, they say they want to lose weight, but then they go out on the weekend and drink, or, you know, they say that actually, you know, they're committed to losing 10 kilos, whatever it takes. They put up all the money up front, but then 3 weeks into it, they go, oh, you know what, Hayden, I've just realised that actually it's all a bit too much for me. I'm just going to do the training. I'm not going to do the nutrition, right? And so people they come to me with this conviction of what they want or what they think they want, a value or someone else's value they're trying to live by, one or the other, which I now know. And you know, again, there'd just be this incongruency between the people that achieve their goals and the people who don't. And so, you know, obviously so much of that had been my own life in trying to work out who I was and set and achieve goals that were mine and were sustainable. And so, you know, at that time I started studying much of what I do now, because it was almost this frustration or void again, where, you know, I'm really proud of this nutrition plan I've wrote. You know, we're going to sort you out, Patia, you're going to get abs, you're going to be all good, you know. And then you come to me and you say, oh, don't worry about it, it's all good. You know, I'm just going to, you know, tone it down a bit. But you've said to me how it would transform your confidence and your self-worth, and I could see that conviction. And so, you know, I really saw. And a philosophy that I have now is, you know, the body is the servant to the mind. And so we, again, understanding those incongruencies, how do we change behavior? How do we get out of our own way, break the long-term patterns and actually take action in alignment with what's most important to us? And so that was where, you know, at that point, I basically just went all in on you know, the work that I do now. I was sort of fortunate in some regards where, because I owned the business and co-owned it, and I had so many great clients already, I almost had this ultimate testing ground, right? Of, you know, they're working with me, they'd be saying, all right, Hayden, well, I, you know, really trust you. And so now it would also be, cool, we can do the physical health, we can do the nutritional health, and actually, let's actually look at some behavior change stuff. And I just found that so impactful in the lives of, you know, these people that I really cared about, my clients. And also, you know, frankly, so much of what I was supporting clients with is all these almost lessons that I'd learned across my life that I hadn't been able to quite put my finger on it, right? And so, over a couple of years of doing that, I just made the full transition to actually sell my shares of the business to my business partner, and just go all in on the work I do now. And so it's just been an evolution of, understanding, in some regards, creating a service to solve my own problems, but also seeing the need for that in people who want to change but would get so caught up in their own behaviour patterns they run their life.
That's cool, man. That's cool.
I love that you haven't called it you went physical health. What was the second one? Nutritional, and then you went behavioural. I was actually anticipating that you would say mental. And then you said behavioural, and I was like, wow, that really puts some really good perspective on it, because there's so many outfits at the moment that are all just, trying to get in on the mental health.
It's very PC.
It is. It is.
And there's benefits of that, of course, but also, it's kind of like if, oftentimes I do talks to organisations, and in many regards, that's very fulfilling. But also, what I don't want, I'm not interested in just ticking a box for your staff, and
cool.
Right?
No, and behavioural is so powerful.
That was cool.
And I like that quote that you just said. The body serves the mind. What about the flip? Because I've also heard the other way around. That I don't know what the quote is. I'm not good at remembering quotes, but it's the other way around, where the body can outdo the mind. What is your thoughts on that? Because
strong body, your idea of like strong body, strong mind.
Yeah. Like, it's the other way around.
Oh yeah, the mind. You talk about mind.
That your body can outwork your mind, because your mind can kind of hit these value systems that aren't yours,
and incongruencies.
Yeah, those incongruencies, and then after that, your mind puts out, but your body can keep going.
Look,
where does that sit?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I guess I would say there's an easier way, which is not having to force it, and actually just getting this right to start with.
Yeah, I agree.
But I do, there's a quote I heard the other day online, and the person said, you've got anger, got these issues, great, use it, right? And I would take that to the next level and say, use what you've got at your disposal right now, but equally, for example, if we could resolve that anger, and where that comes from, and perhaps past trauma and baggage, so that you can that those patterns can be influencing you less, and you can be more conscious and more aligned with your values. That's a fuel that's more sustainable and doesn't come with the same emotional reactions and baggage. But to your point, yes, you can force these things, and I do that myself at times. I don't think it's a case of we're all values orientated or we're not. I think it's a scale at times. You seem very self-aware to me, very purposeful in many regards. But then you referenced that one example with the food, where it's sort of a little bit maybe people pleasing, don't want to make a scene, and so it's not a case of necessarily you're incongruent or you're not, or you're living your values or not. It's sort of that scale, right? Sliding scale, but looking for the opportunities to be more purposeful and be more authentic, and then you actually have that ease in your actions, and again and then also you're not going to have a probability of the emotional distresses coming out, because again you can use anger, you can use certain fuel sources. I'm all for that. But perhaps the values is a more sustainable way that doesn't come with perhaps the same triggers or physical exhaustion or disease.
Yeah. I love how you've wrapped all those spheres together, because they do. They all interrelate, and we often talk about them in isolation and think, cool, if we fix the mind, you fix the mind, and then it might benefit another component, but you actually need to work on it holistically, eh?
Yeah, well, a lot of people talk about, the mind-body relationship, but really it's one system.
Yeah.
It's one system, it's a feedback loop,
And that's why I like that you refer to it as behavioural.
Yeah.
Rather than
mental.
Mind, body.
Yeah,
it's
mental,
the behavioural output that actually represents something that's sitting back here.
Yeah.
And I'm now sitting here like there's some tasks that I absolutely hate, and I lie in bed and I'm like, why are you not doing that task? Why are you not doing that task? And I'm just trying to now understand like some of these behaviors and how to, what is the pain point? But even when I'm listening to you, I'm like, but I don't feel enough pain to do it.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe I shouldn't be doing it. Maybe I should get someone else to do it.
Well, that is a brilliant point, and I was just going to segue to that, which is a beautiful thing called delegation. So Patia,
That's probably why I'm always in pain. I don't know. Just kidding.
But there's some tasks that I'm just like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And, I could be on the outskirts of, getting in big trouble for not doing it. And then I'm still not moving.
Yeah.
And what I'm, really starting to understand is, like I'm sitting here going, there's just not enough pain to move.
Yeah.
But there's not enough passion behind it either to move.
Exactly. So there's
So I don't even wanna
two
do it.
options. There's two options here
Yeah.
that I suggest to my clients. The first one is delegation. Now, in many cases, I would say that's more realistic than what people think. That said, it isn't always realistic, right? Do you want to pick up the laundry? Maybe not, right? So perhaps someone's got to do it. Perhaps there's not a budget to get a cleaner in once a week and do these jobs. So there's two options, right? One is delegate, and in some roles, perhaps business, that's easy to do, right? Although, most people do struggle with delegation and perfectionism, but nevertheless, option one is delegate, which is recognizing that this expectation that you're putting on yourself or your husband's putting on you or society's putting on you isn't actually energy giving, it isn't aligned with your values, right? So option one is delegation or some sort of systems management to better align your time and your actions with your values, okay? Option two is to link it to your values. So what that basically means is changing the association that you have with that, with the expectation you're putting on yourself. So, for example, imagine how much Pati is going to value you when he comes home to a clean house. Imagine the connection and the appreciation that you two could have when you actually do those little perhaps mundane things. I'm assuming certain things, of course, and stereotyping, but again, it's the meaning that we get from something. And so, for example, if we use that example, I don't like cleaning. Cleaning is extremely, and I don't even know if that's what you're talking about, obviously, but, cleaning's very low on my values, right? In my business, I have a cleaner, but at home, not that I clean much, but I know if I, do little things here and there, my wife really appreciates it, my fiance, sorry. And so, I have linked that, our relationship gets stronger and is we have these real great moments of connection. If she comes home and I've cleaned the house, little things like that. And so if I don't have that awareness or I haven't connected those dots, then there's not going to be purpose behind what I'm expecting myself to do or perhaps what I need to do. But if I can actually find meaning in that and link it to your values ideally, then you can actually change that buy-in to it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I like those two options because part of me is like, delegate. And then I didn't know that there was that other option of trying to realign it with our value that might just, get me moving towards it or activating that. That's helpful.
I'll give another example. Perhaps finances isn't too important to you. You might say, I'm not too worried about finances. We're okay. It will be nice to have, more financial independence and financial freedom, but it's not inherently high on my value system, and I'm okay with that. Well, if you were to perhaps connect the dots of how you can support your community, on how if someone in your family got cancer, you could support them, on family trips and experiences you could have, you can actually change your buy-in and reliability and behaviour around finance through connecting it to other values. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
that's great.
again, I think I said one of the earlier things I said is, as humans, we have this incredible ability to make meaning out of things. We can, go through something and we can be offended. We can, have something challenging happen to us, and we can internalize it as trauma where we don't have the coping skills to deal with it. But we can also make meaning out of, certain habits we'd like to change or, certain behaviours we'd like to rewire, so to speak. It's a really incredible thing.
Yeah.
Neuroplasticity, they call that, rewiring the brain.
How do you rewire procrastination?
Okay, so procrastination is, so the first thing would be, well, I'll give you an example with me. So there had been a number of things the last week that I'd procrastinated, and I analyse myself a lot. I obviously do it for probably too much. And every time, if you look at the thing that you are procrastinating, you'll find that, again, it's either one of two things. One, it's low on your values, or two, it's an expectation that you're putting on yourself or that someone else is putting on you. And so, again, finding meaning in doing that. I'm just trying to recall what I was procrastinating with myself. I think I was procrastinating sending some emails, to be honest, and just some sort of more boring invoices, admin, scheduling, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And whilst I haven't had an opportunity to link it yet, if I'm doing a session on myself, clearly my clients and my business is so important to me. If I could connect the dots and again wire the brain in a way where I can say, okay, well, hold on, my business is really important to me. I'm working a lot with high caliber people, and I really want to change their life. So if I'm onto it with my emails, invoicing, and scheduling, that's a better experience that they're going to have with me. I probably get 3 calls a day, people who tell me they called 5 counsellors, no one called them back. Right? So, if serving clients is really important to me, actually, hold on, now I can actually be engaged to do my emails and scheduling and invoices because someone else isn't even calling them back, and I actually have an opportunity to be really purposeful there and really show them that I value them. So I've just solved my own problem just there, right? Because that's changing the why behind why I'm procrastinating.
There's something that you just said there that just, and I haven't heard this. I mean, we've heard it here on the table tonight, is when you said some of the procrastination comes from the expectation not being yours.
Yes.
And it's the expectation is others. And I wonder in that moment, and I wonder whether I'm doing this too, is that I procrastinate because, it's not an expectation that sits as mine.
Yeah.
It's somebody else's, or
Yeah.
it's out there. It doesn't belong to me. And my procrastination is control.
Okay.
Could it be control? Like, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this, but I don't know why I don't want to do it.
Could you give me an example of that? I understand what you're saying. I want to answer accurately for you.
So an example might be like hitting a deadline. Hitting a deadline, and like you need to submit like a report or something, and you're meant to hit a deadline. And so you kind of like take ages, kind of writing it, even though the report is important. You kind of go, no. Is it? And I just wonder if that's like a rebellious thing, or if I get a request from. Now this is interesting. Now if I get a request from someone in my collective, I'll prioritize that and I'll do it.
Okay.
Oh shucks.
No, this is very good. And I just almost just speak to what you're.
And the report's more beneficial for me.
Sure.
But this over here, from a collective group, whether that be family or community, they'll request something from me, not as beneficial, but I'll respond to that. What is that?
So this is where really you know, almost it's an art form, right? But credit to you for actually, I could actually see you connecting the dots as you were talking that out, right? You're saying, well, hold on, this is, but actually this, and there's some, hold on, I'm putting this one over this one, but actually I'm appeasing this, but this is more important. So that's where it starts, and that's where, because there's going to be a lot of people listening to this listening or watching, and whether it's they're not in a position to work with someone like myself or someone else, or all number of reasons. But the truth is, all of us can start to actually really question what's the motive behind what I'm doing here, right? Again, is it to not be rejected and please someone else because that was an experience we had growing up and we so desperately want to avoid that happening again? Is it perhaps that you really value the community work and that's really rewarding to you and that's part of your identity, and so generally speaking you're willing to put that first? I almost couldn't answer that question without doing a full session on you now, but there's so many different different levels to it that we could break down, but just really want to almost commend you on actually just I could really see you, A, being vulnerable, but B, just that free flow of, well, what could that be? Because that's where it starts. Because again, if you're not doing that, almost always the alternative is you're beating yourself up, you're expecting yourself to be someone else, you're comparing yourself to other people's values, now you're depressed, now you're anxious because you're worried about failing these other people's values that aren't even yours. And where does that end?
Yeah. And I think even when I hear you reflect that back, I know what the root of it is.
Okay, very good. Yep.
Yeah.
And most people I find are more self-aware than what they give themselves credit for. I very much believe, the people I work with actually have all the answers. I'm just asking the right questions in the right way and pulling out of them, sometimes I've got to have a bit more, assertiveness, I'll say, well, this looks like it's your relationship with your father. No, it's not. It is. Okay. And then the tears come out. But, again, people are often more self-aware than what we give themselves credit for. And so just with you sort of, you could say, having the right framework. I mean, we've obviously gone through a lot today, but a lot of principles, et cetera, this evening.
Yeah.
And it gives you a lens for you to start asking those quality questions yourself.
Yeah.
Now, once you become conscious of where that's coming from, and I think you know already, you can then start to see that your behavior is being influenced by past situations and past dynamics, not what you value most now.
Yeah.
And so then you get to an interesting position where you can say, okay, you can live your life based on past experiences and the survival instinct, which essentially it is, of the avoidance of pain, or you can actually take a moment to recognize that you're in a different environment, you're a different person, you've learnt lessons from that, and ultimately, those patterns, it sounds like aren't serving you. And so if you can bring those conscious, then you can actually start to choose. There's a quote that I love that Jung says, which is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So until you bring the patterns and the programming to the forefront, it's going to keep influencing you. It's going to keep, affecting your cognitive bias, your justification. Oh, I needed to put them first, no one else. But actually, until you can actually see the why behind that, you're not going to have that emotional freedom. You're not going to have that choice.
I like that, because oftentimes people can feel quite guilty, and they think, oh no, and obviously there's a bit of a emotional pull. I'm letting this person down, but knowing very well it doesn't add any value.
Yes,
you don't get anything, nothing from it. But I'm just curious, because I know we touched on relationships. And I know one of your specialties is relationship challenges and so forth. And I hear, and this would be cool, because I think you're the right person to talk to about this. You hear the slogan every time, or most times, happy
I knew
wife,
you were going to say that.
Happy
Did
life.
you?
I knew you were going to say that. I don't know why.
Happy wife, happy life. And so I hear people say this all the time. Now, people assume, hey, that's true. When your wife is happy, life is grand. But I think otherwise. And so I want to pick your brain in terms of what do you think about that statement? What do you think about that slogan? And is there any truth to that, or is that full of crap?
There's a lot of ways I could analyse that.
You're not going to get in trouble, are you?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm worried about.
We can cut this out. I'm just kidding.
How good are you at editing?
He's the man.
Safeguard yourself, Hayden. I'm just kidding.
No, look, I think what I would suggest is that a meaningful relationship and sustainable partnership, there has to be fair exchange in that, right? And that means that, another way of thinking about it is, if you help your partner support their values, they're going to help you support your values. If you help someone get what they want, they're going to help you get what you want. And that principle applies in business, in all different areas. Like, for example, I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to speak to your audience in this conversation. Extremely rewarding to me. But also, there's a value exchange, right? You guys have the audience, and hope, I'm bringing some insights. So there's a, spoken about or not, there's a fair exchange there, right? And so the happy wife, happy life, the first thing I'd probably say is, fulfilled wife is probably a bit more of a meaningful thing to strive for, because happiness is transient. Things aren't always going to line up I'll just quickly say, just to give some context to that, you know, I say to my clients, don't aim for happiness, aim for fulfillment, but appreciate the happiness along the way. Because the fulfillment and the meaning, the purpose is much more sustaining than happiness, okay? And we can come back to that later if you like. But essentially, you know, for a meaningful relationship, you need to have a shared vision, okay? So you're never going to have the same values as your partner, the same priorities in life, because again, remember that our values and our purpose is based on our own challenges and our own voids, right? And so, you know, your partner is clearly going to have a different lived experience, and so they're going to have their own quest and voids that they're in the pursuit of fulfilling. However, if you can take the time to understand what's most important to you, which again it can be a challenge in itself, and then communicate that to your partner, and you can both take the opportunity to, instead of projecting onto each other how they should live their life and what's important to you, and, you know, fitness is important to me, so it should be important to you, Patia, or, you know, I work and I love working, and so you should work, you shouldn't be a mum. You know, most of us, we just you know, naively and unconsciously just project our values and our frame, you know, our lens of the world, we project that onto others rather than honouring who our partner is and what's most important to them. So, you know, long story short, I use that joke, you know, with my friends, you know, but I certainly wouldn't live by it. And I think that I would be encouraging my clients to understand what's important to them, understand what's important to their partner, and know that your partner is going to support you when she's fulfilled in her purpose. And so, you know, actually being a bit more diligent about it. You know, there's almost a bit of I think there's a lot of avoidance built into that phrase. You know, there's almost certain, you know, I don't want her to bite my head off. Don't want her to bite my head off. I'm walking on eggshells. You know, don't want her to have a go at me. As opposed to, if you could help her fulfill what's important to her, she's not going to be in that emotional state, and actually she's going to be loving and supporting you and your values, and you can support her and hers. And now you have a shared vision that you're working towards.
I agree. I like that. I like that answer. Awesome. And it should. I totally agree in terms of mutual happiness. That both parties it's reciprocal. That both people work together to make each other happy. And so I like that. That's awesome.
It's not a prerequisite. Meaning you have to fulfill it first. No, I was kidding.
Listen,
You've seen that real good.
You just throw some good nuggets, some real good nuggets, Hayden. But it was mostly for our men, because a lot of viewers are men,
yes,
men inclined, and so a lot of men out there. And I think one of the key questions a lot of men are asking: how can I be a good dad? How can I be a good father? Or more so, how can I be a good man in general? And so you talk about values and so forth, but what are some of the key elements or some of the key ingredients to becoming a good man, just a man who's just well-rounded, but also a good father?
So I'll start with the idea of good. Might sound surprising, but I actually try and stay away from language good and bad in my client work, because often that can be associated with very much part of the problem, which is these social idealisms that keep us trapped, right? For example, what is good to the Catholic Church? What is good to me? What is, you know, perhaps I have a different relationship with finance, and so making money so I can invest in myself and serve more clients is good. To someone else, that's bad, making money, right? So I see what you mean. But I first of all would start with reframing that, and rather than saying what is a good man, what is almost a purposeful man, right? What is a man on purpose and conscious representing, you know, the conversation we just had before about starting to become aware of these patterns and often trauma and coping strategies that play out in our life that isn't bad, but can take us away from our purpose and can result in us being more emotionally reactive and often projecting our values onto others and expecting them to live in our values, not honouring who they are. With respect to the parenting thing, and this is an unbelievably delicate balance with being a father, because obviously the role of a father is to support and nurture and really bring out the best in his, you know, if we say his son, for example, right? And so that's going to mean, in many regards, challenging the hell out of them. Sort your shit out. You can do better. I can see that you can, do better. But I would say the art form is balancing that with honouring who they are and what's most important to them, and not expecting them to be who you are as the father. In many regards, the things that we project onto our children, and this is obviously more true if they're teenagers or a bit older, is the experience. It's a reflection of the experiences that we've had or the opportunities we didn't take. So, for example, a common one would be, I didn't try very hard in school, and so now I'm lecturing and projecting that onto my son and saying, you've got to work hard and you've got to study. And I'm not honouring that, hold on, I've had my own life journey that's given me that context. And actually, maybe maths isn't very important to him. Maybe he's actually, maybe that's actually not where his genius lies, but actually it's in his art form. And maybe I'm minimising that and putting, expecting him to achieve in what's important to me and not honouring who he is, right? And so it's going to be that balance, which is true with life, this dichotomy, this dance of support, challenge, right? Too much support, we become juvenile and dependent and naive. Too much challenge, and we don't have the support system and the framework to go out and do something. So it's going to be giving them that balance of support and challenge as a father to your son or daughter, but equally taking the time to not project all your baggage and your hopes and dreams onto them, and encourage them in what's most important to them. Even if their interest is something that you think, they can't make a career out of that, encouraging and supporting them in that value structure. Let's say they're 10 years old. Well, they actually build their confidence and self-worth in that, and then when their values change over time, that actually just transfers to what's important to them. One thing I didn't mention, I could, again, multiple layers to everything I talk about, but one of the things that I didn't mention in the story, in my story, is that when I was through my childhood and teenage years, I really loved strategy card games, particularly Yu-Gi-Oh. So I loved Yu-Gi-Oh, and I got so much meaning and purpose out of that. And as much as I had a very strained relationship with my father growing up, he very much supported me with my strategy card games and Yu-Gi-Oh, and I travel all around New Zealand between 13 to probably 20 playing this card game, playing in high level tournaments, and had all these experiences. And someone else could say, that's silly, that's a waste of time, you're putting money into it. But actually, if I look back, that's the origins of my problem solving and my relationship abilities, because I'm going to these tournaments and I'm, playing card games with, in many regards, 40-year-old men, and it's very and so I really appreciate that both my parents, to be fair, very much supported me in that. They could have said, that's never going to go anywhere. You're prioritizing that over your studies. Again, there's a balance there. They still challenge me there. But that actually was very much a catalyst in my values expression at the time that allowed me to grow in other ways. And so honouring your children and youth for who they are, and not just projecting what's important to you onto them.
That's good. Because I can imagine a lot of fathers, especially you talk about projecting their maybe trauma or some of the things that they've kind of wished they could have had the opportunity to do. Like you said, I can see a lot of fathers, and I'm talking about myself as well, in terms of you're on the sidelines and your kids playing sports. You come on, you got to do this, and then, you get back in the car, and you should have done this and that. And I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And so that's.
And again, if you aren't clear on your values, and again, I'm not saying that's always realistic. I appreciate how challenging that can be, and again, a lot of people don't get this sort of education, right? But if you're not clear on your values, and your father's putting all these expectations on you to be who he wants you to be, well, again, now you're depressed because you're not living up to this value system that isn't yours. When in actual fact, if you were clear on who you were and, you were able to break free from the expectations of other people, with their best intentions, of course, now you're able to actually value yourself for who you are, not who others want you to be or who you expect yourself to be.
That's good.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. What a great, just how you've, the that we need to be more aware on, what we're trying to project on our other halves.
Yeah,
and
because we
on
do it
our
with our best.
children.
In many regards, we're completely unconscious and emotionally reactive, and it's you should do this. But the other side of it is, we do it because we care. If I've gone to the gym and I've lost weight and it's transformed my life, and you're my friend and I want the best for you. Excuse me. It'd be very easy for me with my best intentions to project that onto you, but you should go to the gym. It's going to change your life. And so, again, whether I'm conscious that I'm doing it, it's going to transform your life, Patia. I really want the best for you. Or whether I'm unconscious, go to the gym. What are you doing? There's going to be that dichotomy of support and challenge. But it really, where I would suggest that the viewers start is just starting to take the time to become more conscious of these patterns, why they do what they do, and where their expectations for themselves, their others come from. And again, what is truly, sincerely, authentically them versus what is an expectation or idealism from someone else or past or trauma, etc.
Is there an order? Like, you talk about being conscious, having values, recognizing patterns. Is there one thing that comes before the other? Because, I'm thinking about the dad who... this is how he orders his house, by saying that you're going to do this. And for some families that has worked, but not always knowing, maybe the internal damage that's doing. But then for the dads who are wanting to do this for their children, so that they get to grow up and not have to have these moments in life where they're like, what needs to happen first? Is it the values? Or is it just having that consciousness first, or the desire? I don't know, what goes first? Or is there a go first? Because there probably elements.
There probably isn't a official starting point. I would say that the values would be the single most impactful thing, because again, our values filter what we see in life, the opportunities we take, what we do, what we take action on, what we procrastinate in, everything. Absolutely fundamental. But then I appreciate, again, that can be a bit of a process and can take a lot of reflection and even the art of sort of connecting the dots and articulating, so it's that creative work, right? It's not just, perhaps, Patia, again, your creative work doesn't just come out in one way, it comes out in multiple ways, right? Your personal development and quest for truth doesn't necessarily just come out in YouTube and this show, it probably also comes out in your faith, right? So connecting those dots, I appreciate, isn't always easy, but obviously I would encourage the viewers and listeners to really, I think there's no reason why they can't get at least clearer than ever before on who they are and what's most important to them through some of those questions we asked or the full process I referenced earlier. But in terms of where to start, I would encourage people to start with the values, but also that questioning, where is this motive coming from? And again, as I said, becoming conscious of the unconscious and these experiences we have and how they influence us, I think I would really encourage everyone to start to ask those questions and develop a healthy level of curiosity, because, obviously I do it for a living, so it's a little bit different, but I'm having insights and I can work with someone. I don't tend to work with people for months or years on end. We sort of, generally speaking, do more short-term intensives, but often we might solve the primary challenge and then we actually realize, there's all these other patterns as well. And, that's not even necessarily bad. I mean, again, these are patterns that predominantly are trying to protect us in a survival instincts, right? But developing a healthy level of questioning to understand, well, my initial response is, someone's offered me feedback, my initial response is no. Actually, well, hold on, I recall that my dad would always tell me what to do growing up, and he was quite overbearing. So perhaps I've developed a bit of a avoidance mechanism to people offering me feedback. If you can make that connection, that's a huge insight where now you can start to go, well, hold on, this person isn't my father. Why am I treating him that way? Because there's unconscious programming that wasn't fully conscious.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's so powerful. And I think you're right. The starting point is when you start asking those questions, and conscience isn't something you consciousness
Yes.
isn't something you decide. It's already there, right? And so you and I see myself lying in bed either late at night or when I wake up trying to struggle to do those tasks. And I often am asking myself, like, why? Why do you not want to do it? Or if I've done that trade-off,
Yeah.
Not done this and have done that, and then at the end of it, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, look, there was more benefit spending time over here than it was over here, but yet I chose that. And what are the benefits? And then I try to justify it in my head, like, these are long-term relationships, you need to keep them. But I'm sure they would still be there if I just shared with them.
Exactly.
That I actually have a goal and I really, need to spend time over
Well,
here.
let's speak to that to a second, because there's something there that I could perhaps really offer you that is relevant in a lot of these situations, which, we're obviously just a lot of today's talk is talking about, starting to unravel and get to the bottom of these beliefs that we hold, these patterns, these things we get caught up in. One way that you can very much do that is actually what you alluded to just there, is asking yourself, what is the benefits of the action that you're taking? So, for example, the first thing, I think you sort of touched on there is, I'm maintaining that relationship. And you can take that further. You can say, well, what's a benefit of maintaining that relationship? Where you stand with them. What's the benefit of that? And if you continue to ask yourself, what are you getting out of this behavior? Continue to ask, not just once, but, 10, 20, 30 times, you'll actually reveal what the motivations are. And so, and you'll know when you actually get to the root cause of it. Again, as I've said, that's what I'm always after, because we can unravel everything from there and really have some breakthroughs. And so you might go, well, the benefit is, I'm maintaining that relationship. What's the benefit of that? Okay, well, I'm strengthening that connection. What's the benefit of that? Oh, I'm not getting rejected. Oh, shit. I'm not getting rejected.
Yeah.
Where do the origins of that come from? Right? So that would be something very profound that I think will also just be important to add to this discussion, asking yourself, what are the benefits you're getting out of this? And this is true for any behavior, any decision, any addiction. What are the benefits we're getting out of it? Like I said with the client earlier today, alcoholism, what are the benefits he's getting out of it? Well, actually, he gets moments of connection when he goes to the pub every day, and he has certain people there that know who he is and what he's up to. Now, I'm not saying there's not addictive pathways that are reinforced. Of course there is, and of course there's work to be done there. But even with that individual going, hold on, a benefit is I feel more connected to people. If he brings that conscious, now he can consciously choose relationships and connection that doesn't involve alcohol, as opposed to just judging him and saying going to the pub is bad and not honouring actually the intricacies of why he was doing that and who he is. Remember earlier I said that everything we do has a reason. Ideally, we want to bring those reasons conscious and align with our values. But the other reasons are very often an attempt to fulfill our values. So with this individual, his highest value was relationships and connection. He didn't realize that was a big part of his drinking, to really get, almost get into that state and have have those connections. If he recognizes that, he now has an opportunity to create more meaningful connections on his terms that don't require the alcohol. So asking, what are the benefits of the behavior that's not serving you?
Yeah, that's awesome. My gosh, so powerful, so powerful.
It's a good, some real good kōrero. I just wanted I need to ask you this. Because you put yourself, obviously you're in the public domain. You put yourself out there, and obviously with the podcast, and we put ourselves out there, public domain, and it's part and parcel. People going to love you or loathe you.
Well, I mentioned that support and challenge thing before, right? I said this is why people stay in a job that they don't hate, or they're in a loveless relationship, because there's challenges on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. And you're right. But I'm thinking of those individuals. For some reason, some people, I mean, you said feedback. Obviously, if people give feedback and you get comments and so forth.
Who's offended?
Yeah, so exactly. And I'm thinking, because I wanted to understand some of the behaviors, and you would, obviously you're the best person to ask this question. Some of the behaviors, because you put yourself out there, and for some reason, and people will just throw things in comment, and they're quite bold. Obviously online, they're quite on the keyboard and so forth, keyboard warriors. And so, what are some of the behaviors in terms of as to why some people just for some reason, they don't even know who you are from above soap, but they just throw it out there. They might refute you, or just even like just hate, like real, like there's a lot of malice towards it, or real hate, even though they didn't know you from above. So where is that coming from? Where is that coming from? Or have you experienced it as well, Hayden?
The short answer is that what you're doing is a mirror to them of what they haven't done in their life, what they wish they could do, their shortcomings, and that's being triggered and then being redirected. That's the short answer to that.
Because they usually do it on new pages that they just created like a couple of days ago.
Oh, really?
They're not, and they don't have a picture.
Yeah.
They don't have a person.
Yeah.
There's no description.
Yeah. I mean,
Can you say it nice and loud again? And
well, you know, and again, I'm careful what I say because there's so many sort of 8 times out of 10 that, but little nuanced, you know, other scenarios. But one thing that would be very accurate would be everything that irritates us about others represents something in ourselves. Always.
Wow.
So let's say, for example, Patia, let's say that you are talking over top of me the whole interview. Now you're not. That's just an example, right? Very, very brilliant interviewer, thank you. But let's say you're talking over top of me and I'm judging you for that. This is just an example, that would very likely be a reflection of me not having communication skills historically and me beating myself up for talking over top of people or being insensitive. And I've felt, you know, I've judged myself for that and I've felt guilty. That's in my unconscious. And now when you demonstrate that behaviour, again, that's a mirror to the things that I actually resent or are challenged with about myself, past or present.
It's good.
And that's another medium of a signal, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Another
That's
opportunity.
Feedback loop, right?
Yeah, that's our feedback loop.
Yeah.
That we will engage in coping activities to.
And I remember before, you know, we spoke about that concept of the shadow, you know, a couple of hours back, and I think, you know, what a
couple of hours back,
a couple of weeks back. I don't actually know the time, I'm assuming, but I, you know, all good. But you know, and I said that it's wise to not view these parts of ourselves as dark and negative, but to view them as feedback. So, you know, this may be helpful for the audience. So I don't write comments like that online, right? But, you know, as being real and vulnerable, you're a real person. You know, I might be on Instagram, I'm scrolling through and see some post and I go, where the hell does that person get off saying that, right? And I catch myself and I go, oh, geez, Hayden, you know. And then I might think, wow, that person's got a big audience. I'm not there yet. I haven't given myself permission to do that. Or maybe I'm afraid of getting to that level, right? And so again, everything that irritates us about others is an opportunity for us to understand ourselves more. And so if I'm living my life, don't judge, Hayden, don't be bad, only say positive things, I'm actually missing that huge opportunity to learn more about my own patterns, my own behaviour, and that opportunity for emotional freedom.
That's brilliant. I really value what you've just said there. Because we quite often can get into that critical mindset and can sit there and it's almost like the more you sit there and sort of attack whatever it is that you're attacking, like it doesn't feel good. You know, it kind of amplifies it. But what you're highlighting is there's a real struggle internally that hasn't been resolved, that's reaping it, that's expressing itself. And
imagine trying to push that down for your whole life and never addressing it.
Yeah.
So let's, as we said, you know, let's actually take the moment to look at these unpleasant, you know, icky parts of ourselves. What do they represent? Where do they come from? I mean, they're better out than in. They're better conscious than unconscious, because if you're not aware of them, that anger, that trigger, those reactions, that'll come out in an uncontrollable way one day when you're stressed with your wife or when someone gives you criticism. It'll all come out. So it's wiser for you to be aware that it's there, to start to understand where it comes from, and for it to find a bit more of a home within you, as opposed to trying to disassociate it.
It's good.
Yeah, I love this. This is so good.
That's so good. Listen, I'm conscious of time as well, mate, and that's just amazing, brilliant mind. And I'm not just saying that, you're brilliant mind, my friend. Obviously, we've talked about values. potential pain, incongruency, and also a lot of mutual happiness in terms of happy wife, happy life, and all that kind of stuff. But brother, I need to ask you, of all the values and the values that you have kind of adopted, or the values that now have changed, which one, or evolved, which one in terms of the values you have now is the number one for you?
Definitely the problem solving. And I think, and I appreciate the kind words there, but where you've just, you're a brilliant mind, it's nothing more than me being aligned with my values, right? And I spoke to you earlier about how, we come alive when we're congruent with what's most important to us. Just the accounting example, because it's so easy. If you said, Hayden, what was your revenue or taxes or GST return? I don't know, and if I was expecting myself to do that, I'm going to be, I'm going to perhaps have self-depreciating thoughts, right? And so the point I was giving there is I appreciate that. My highest value was problem solving in my own life and in others. And, for the viewers and listeners, if they can get clear on what their values are, that's really where their unique genius is. And so giving themselves permission to align themselves with that and be bold and take meaningful action there is going to be the best probability of that real sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Man, thank you.
In the zone. That's so cool. No, thank you.
Oh man, I know it's late, but brother, I just want to say thank you so much for the incitement, for the enlightenment, also the insights as well. Just brought a lot to the surface. I believe so, for not only for myself, but also I can guarantee the viewers and the listeners. And so it's been helpful. It's more so for our men as well. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, everything Patia said, but what I gauge from you is you've got so much care for other people, and I love that because I get quite frustrated when people share stuff and they haven't actually lived through it. And I'm like, what gives you the right to share this? Whereas you've lived through it and your story shares it all. But in your learnings, you've also seen, that there's a struggle for others who may never find these answers. Yeah. And that's sad. Like even just learning today that, because I'm like, I thought my values were all good because they're part of my collective.
Wow.
And I'm like, actually, some of those values I don't really want.
Yeah.
Or they don't benefit me in certain parts or domains of my life.
Exactly.
And I'm kind of going...
Opportunity to update that, right?
Yeah, an opportunity to update that and be more aware of those moments when I'm feeling incongruent. And it's not even a word I use. Like, I'm someone. So
Nowadays.
even trying to put the word together is a bit of a mission, but great word to use to kind of go, cool, here's an incongruent moment that I'm sitting in right now. What's coming to the surface for me?
And then what would it look like to be more congruent, more conscious, in alignment with what's most important to you? So best case, defining both. What is that moment, that opportunity, and then what would the action be that would actually be more meaningful and beneficial? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you've just extended that for me because I might have just sat at incongruent and awareness for ages and not really try to pursue the next step, which is how do I now become congruent? Because sometimes I think resolve almost feels impossible with some of that shit that rocks up.
I won't open up a whole nother conversation or be here all night. Well, you touched on guilt earlier, Patia, and I didn't talk to that because I'm mindful of time. But, one thing I'd suggest for you, just from, again, automatically always in analysis mode, is looking at how these actions you would love to take serve those you care about. Because there will likely be an assumption that you doing what's important to you or some of these actions you'd love to take, how that's a disservice to others. But in actual fact, you doing what's most important to you, is there not a encouragement of others to fulfill what's important to them, leading by exemplification? If it's your children, for example, you could tell them, you can be whatever you want to be in life and take bold actions. Well, you've actually got an opportunity to show them. So if you can actually look at opportunities and again create those neural links we spoke about, right, those associations at how you fulfilling what's important to you actually supports others, your community, your family, that gives you more fuel to actually be more on purpose.
Yeah, bringing those two
100%.
spaces together.
The more dots you
Yeah.
can connect, the better.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Gosh,
I
today's
know.
been so cool.
Hard out, man. Hard out.
Absolutely anticipated you coming on today and
No,
got way more.
you know, the coolest thing about it, Hayden, is because obviously the statement with Mandate is really about encouraging, inspiring men to live a purpose-driven life.
Yeah.
And I love what you talked about, and just kind of concluding our talanoa, our conversation is around purpose.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee a lot of people who are listening and watching, I think you've kind of started a lot of the healing process for some men. I think, oh wow, and got people to really think, as I have really. I just wanted to just listen to you and share that. Wow, and I didn't think about that. Oh, that's a good point. So you've really started the conversation and the thinking process for a lot of people out there. So, brother, thank you so much, man. Thank you.
And you've made me understand his love for that kind of content.
Great.
Yeah,
'Cause,
you saved my marriage, and so
Because I'd be forever like, can we not just have a normal conversation? Like, I just want to talk about this. And he'll go there. And then I'm like, I don't have the energy to go there. I just want to go here. And so
I have that exact same dynamic with my fiance. And so she'll say, what are you thinking about? And I'll be like, you don't want to know. And she'll be like, no, what are you thinking about? The meaning of life? Oh, okay, you know. But you know, again, if you know that about Patia, then you can actually start to appreciate that about him and honour him for who he is, as opposed to if you don't know his value structure, then often the default is, what are you on about, man?
yeah.
Oh, man.
And I'd go
Shut up.
My next line.
You're the man, bro. Like the honor and appreciate. I love that.
Because my next line is, you've got issues, you've got unresolved issues, and then he'd be like, and then I'd have to go calm down, come back in, and try and appreciate this perspective because I've got a bit more energy for it.
Yeah.
But today I actually got to really learn, where that comes from for him, and so rather than reacting now and saying I don't want to go there, okay, let's go there.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, again, you're an individual with your own set of values, so you don't have to have, you don't have to value those deeper conversations as much as he does. But again, before when I spoke about the relationship dynamics, he's got his values that give him a sense of purpose. You've got yours, but look for those opportunities of overlap.
Yeah. Overlap.
Yeah.
I'll think about that one.
We'll come back for part two.
Awesome,
come back
Hayden.
to see if you're still on the
Shush.
at the table.
I'm going to get fired tonight. I'm going to get fired tonight.
Oh, Hayden, thank you so much, brother. But hey, brother, we always give our guests a gift. And so we always do a caricature or cartoon of how we envision our guests to be.
Wow. Is that one where I got the big ears and?
Yeah, because it's similar caricature. But on behalf of the Mandate team, this is for you, my friend.
Wow. Who did you do this?
Yeah, it's me, bro.
Well, what a brilliant expression of your values, of the creativity side of things. I'll show that to them.
I know, it looks so good. You showed me this afternoon.
Appreciate it. Nah, thank you so much.
I'm going to put this in my office.
Oh, appreciate it, man, brother. Thank you, mate. But before we conclude, Hayden, is there anyone you can think of the top of your head that you think that would add some value or be perfect to come on the podcast?
I've got two people that I would suggest, perhaps. Obviously, I work with a lot of interesting people, and so I hear a lot of incredible stories. Both Auckland-based too, I believe. Paul Reed is a client of mine. He wouldn't mind me saying that. And he has had, and I almost won't reveal too much because he's got a lot of beautiful intricacies to his story. But he's an actor. He's been on Shortland Street way back. He was in the band Rubicon, if anyone remembers that. Yeah. So he was in that band Rubicon, and he's since gone on to be one of New Zealand's most successful property investors. And now he's in a band called Capital Theatre, a New Zealand band, and they recently opened for Foo Fighters. And so,
serious?
yeah, and so he's had an incredible, it's an absolute pleasure. Like I said, I love working with people, but he's had an absolute journey of an expression of different values, and he would have a number of stories, really inspiring stories about just becoming who you are and finding yourself.
Wow.
Yeah, see if you can get him on.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Nice.
Paul Reed.
And who's the other one?
The other one would be Deanna Yang, who runs Moustache Cookies.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I think they're just up the road, aren't they?
Yeah.
Are they?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So she's a client of mine. She's fantastic. Speak to her.
That's me.
Awesome.
Yeah. Great entrepreneur.
Oh, man, that'd be awesome. No.
And cookies. And you kidding me?
Yeah, awesome. Oh, man, thank you once again. But we always give our guests the last word. And so, Hayden, any words of encouragement for our men, our listeners, or people in general out there?
I think take the time to get clear on what's most important to you, who you are, the things that bring you the most intrinsic set of meaning and purpose, and give yourself permission to break free from the expectations of others that you may have not have even known have been there, or the level that they're influencing you. Take the time to bring some of those patterns to the forefront, identify them, what serves you, what isn't, and start to make the changes where you can.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hayden Brown.
Can I quickly add one more thing?
Go on, Brad.
Where can people find you?
Facebook, Instagram, probably the easiest way would be my website, haydenbrown.co.nz.
Nice. Cool. Please, I guarantee you'll be, I guess, life-changing. You need to talk to Hayden Brown. Hayden Brown, our number one. Should I say? Yeah, I'll say it. Number one human behaviour specialist in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so please check him out, Hayden Brown. Thank you once again, my friend.
Thank you, Peter.
And so please don't forget to subscribe. We look forward to your well-thought-out comments. And as usual, Caroline,
Refine.
unlock,
And take charge.
Mandate.